It's intermission time. It's great to get out to the movies.
So today we have Joshua on the podcast. Joshua, can you intro yourself to the listener of who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Joshua Rofé. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I have a series that is actually airing right now on HBO called The Mortician.
This is so fun that we're talking about this because this is like the exact type of content I consume. Like I love these types of stories and documentaries, and so I'm excited to chat. Okay, so to get started on the section dedicated to your general movie taste, when you go and think of a movie that you're wanting inspiration, you want to get the creative juices flowing, what movie would you put on?
I'm just going to rattle off a few.
Yeah.
I mean, Mean Streets was a life-changing movie for me. The Long Goodbye, The Conversation, Five Easy Pieces, Pickpocket, The Exorcist. As the years have gone on, I've kind of fallen more and more in love with William Friedkin stuff and Robert Altman stuff. And that's not to say that I didn't love it at the outset when I was, coming of age as a person falling in love with film. But God, I go see a lot of old movies on the big screen. That's one of the great things in LA. Anybody listening, you probably already know this, but there's a website called Revival Hub LA, and they have an Instagram account you can follow too. And it is insane how many old movies are playing in this city, across the city, 7 days a week. I mean,
so cool.
It could be 9 a.m. It could be midnight, and everything in between. And I had seen Nashville, just, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times over the years, but I went and saw it on the big screen for the first time maybe a month ago. And I walked away feeling like that is the most effortless film made ever. It was it was unbelievable. And I got that in a way on the big screen that I hadn't just watching at home on DVD, 12, 15, 20 years ago. And unbelievable. And then, I think probably 3 days later or a week later, I saw M. Or again, probably like the 4th time, but it was the first time on the big screen. And you're seeing Fritz Lang do things, in effectively like 1930, 1929, right around there, that would be used by filmmakers in 50 years later. It's unbelievable. So I kind of don't remember your question, but all I know is that lately my relationship with all these films that I love has sort of taken a new turn in that I try to see them on the big screen as often as I can.
Yeah. Earlier you said that one of the movies or maybe a few are life-changing. Do you mean life-changing in the sense that those got you into your current life and career, or in what way?
Oh, yeah, totally. Just the first time you have an experience, or the first time I had an experience seeing a movie that got under my skin, I'm sure I was a kid, Mm-hmm. I remember being a kid and seeing The Land Before Time, and it fucking me up to no end. And also, there was a great sad movie when I was a kid called My Girl with Macaulay Culkin. And I mean,
oh yeah,
I think did it come out in '94?
I don't know, but that movie kills me.
Which would have made me. I was born at the end of '82, so I'm probably let's just call it 12 at that point. And and at the same time, also in that 10 to 12 range, seeing Tango and Cash, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell, amazing performance by Jack Palance. You see these movies and you keep thinking about them when you're a kid in school and you're daydreaming. And I had no idea that film would be something that is a career. I'm from New Jersey. We are not people, my family, there is no artistic ambition. Very much sort of, blue collar, really just sort of working to survive. You don't love your job, you just have a job kind of thing. And so I think it probably starts back there. And then at some point you turn 17, 18 and you start to just become aware of more in terms of just how the world works. And you think, God, I just saw this movie called Mean Streets, and I had this older cousin who just kind of, he handed me the 70s, you know, and I just sat in the basement. I wasn't very social as a kid. I was just played hockey, stopped playing hockey, fell in love with movies, you know, and just stayed in the basement and watched all these movies and thought, God, that is what I want to do. But it keeps going, today. There's this great documentary called Los Angeles Plays Itself.
Yeah, I love that documentary.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I watch it my idea of holiday movies every year, call it between like Thanksgiving to New Year's. Los Angeles Plays Itself, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and Misery. I love those movies so much, and it's really in the last probably 15 years, or even 10 years. I would call it probably 10, 12 years with Los Angeles Plays Itself, that those movies just, oh my God, they're just, I find them endlessly inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's sick. I'm glad you mentioned that documentary because, so I've only lived in LA for 2 years, maybe like a little over now.
Where are you from?
I'm from San Jose and I lived in San Francisco. So I'm like a Bay Area person.
Sure.
And like the Bay and LA, there's always like the joke of like they're against like a little bit of a rivalry. And so my whole life growing up, I was like, LA's so lame. It's such a lame place to be. And I was so prideful of being from the Bay, and I loved consuming movies. Like anytime a movie was filmed in LA, I just thought it was the coolest thing. And then I watched LA Plays Itself, I think when I knew I would be moving here, and it made me like have a non-judgmental take on the city and fall in love with Los Angeles. And I just was like, that doc kind of was the instigator to change my perspective. Now living here, I love Los Angeles. I also love loving where I live. Sure. So that's cool that you mentioned that, because that doc was very pivotal for me. That
to me, this will either make sense or sound bizarre. To me, I love noir stories, and more specifically, I love LA noir stories. And that doc feels like LA noir to me. And the very obvious reason is there's a lot of clips from noir films, whether it's a classic or a B movie that we've never heard of. But I just feel like the voiceover, just everything is so, the way you move through the city, you're up in the hills to down on Skid Row. It's just, oh my God, it's amazing.
I want to get into your style as a creator. Do you have a director that's kind of like your North Star, or a few that you point to when you think of your style and your taste?
I don't know about as far as style, but with taste, I mean, it's like I love Robert Altman, like I said. I love Friedkin. I love Scorsese. I love Paul Thomas Anderson. I think he might be my favorite filmmaker, I would say. Tarantino is also right there, and so is Fincher. It's on any given day, it could be any of the people that I just mentioned. I think it feels project specific in terms of...
Yeah, that makes sense.
For The Mortician, I was thinking of... I mean, it's an LA noir story. That's what I wanted to find, and that's what I found. And Sunset Boulevard, I don't know if you ever saw DOA, 1949. It's amazing. You can go rent it on Amazon for probably $3. And I think the movie might be 75 minutes long. It's quick. It opens, it's this shot, you're following this guy. He's walking in, what seems to be downtown LA. He goes into a building, you're following him. Opening credits are playing over this. And it's actually the way I remember it. Maybe that's not true, but I think it's true. And then he sits down in a chair, and you hear his voice finally. You haven't seen his face. And he says, "I'd like to report a murder." And the person opposite him says, who's law enforcement that he's saying this to, who? And the camera comes around and he says, "My own." And then you go back in time and you find out what the hell he's talking about, because that's obviously a crazy thing for a living person to say, right? And so whether it's that, to The Long Goodbye, to Chinatown, to Mulholland Drive, just thinking of how creepy and fascinating Los Angeles felt to me, especially in my earliest years living here. I moved here August 26th, 01. And I was right after high school, literally end of the summer. Didn't go to college, just moved out here and just, started doing odd jobs. I remember, the first job that I had and was able to get, day one of work was September 11th.
Whoa.
It was crazy. And so I don't know if I was 18. I was completely alone. I didn't know anybody here, and I was somewhat antisocial already as a kid. And so I got here. It was September 11th. In October, I see Mulholland Drive. It was enough to just sort of infiltrate a young mind and feel like, fuck, the world doesn't feel safe, and this place doesn't feel safe. And I'm afraid to drive on the freeway, so it's taking me forever to get places that are further away. and then you get told, oh, you have to. We used to have MapQuest directions.
I used MapQuest.
Okay, yeah, I'm geographically inept, and so I would always someone would tell me when I moved here, you got to get this thing called a Thomas Guide, and there was no way in hell I was going to be able to read that or follow it. And so I would print my MapQuest directions and drive to wherever. And, now I'm driving alongside a cliff because I'm supposed to go to this thing in, Malibu or along Mulholland Drive, and I'm scared of heights, and I'm 18, 19, and I'm driving on the side of a cliff. Like, where the fuck am I, And I, fast forward, I love Los Angeles. It's my favorite place on earth. If I could, I would make everything here. And the truth is, my filmmaking dreams and aspirations are films that take place here, and I still carry that sort of creepy, fearful, I'm not safe, it's not safe feeling with me. But sorry if this sounds pretentious, but like through a cinematic lens, as I'm thinking of stories that and so I love it, I love it. And those movies all have that for me, but, in different ways.
It's wild to me hearing people like you's origin story, where it's like right now you have a docu-series on Max, and it's like to see like where you came from till now, like quite literally such a cool trajectory, to where you've gotten in your career. I just think that's so fun. It gets me like really excited and motivated in my own life and like what's to come, Oh, I wanted to ask, how has your taste changed over time? Like, is there anything you used to love, but now you see differently?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's like, I still love Tango and Cash, I feel like just depending on where I was in my life, I could sit still for a quieter movie or not, and sometimes you go through a phase where you can really appreciate, quiet and stillness. And other times you have no patience for it because you're just like, you're in kind of like young, crazy person trying to figure your shit out mode, and I mean, right now I feel like I can appreciate honestly anything that I have a visceral response to.
Yeah. Okay, to close out this section, what is the last movie that you saw in theaters and streaming?
The last movie that I saw in theaters would be M. I saw it at Vidiots. That was just...
Oh, fun.
Yeah, that was I don't know, maybe that was 2 weeks ago, maybe?
We love Vidiots.
Yeah, we just were able to show the first episode there last Friday night of The Mortician.
Very cool.
It was great to be there doing that. And then streaming, it's funny because when I got your questions, I was like, oh, I want to talk about, or when I got the question of what, pick a film that you want to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, I want to talk about The Long Goodbye. I love that so much, and I thought about it so much, even though it probably feels like it has nothing to do with The Mortician. That's something that I kind of thought about a lot in the beginning, and so I rewatched it. It was like, oh, what a perfect excuse. It's been probably a year since I saw it last.
Okay, well, that was a really perfect transition to now
Cool.
talk about The Long Goodbye.
Yeah.
So we're going to discuss The Long Goodbye, 1973 by Robert Altman. I guess to start off, what made you want to talk about this movie specifically?
I feel like that movie, it captures the thing I was talking about for me, in terms of feeling new and untethered. And when you're watching Elliot Gould go through this world, it's just like nobody wants him around. That reminds me of like attempting to break into show business, frankly, and it just it feels weird and dangerous, and everybody's lying to him. He doesn't know who he can trust. And I also love, this is a very small detail, but it was one of the things that when I first moved to LA, and even in call it the first probably decade living here, it was something that really blew my mind, and I thought was kind of so weird and amazing. When he goes into the Malibu colony, the guard at the gate is always doing impressions of famous actors, and I just remember in that first year especially realizing, oh wow, everybody here that I'm running into either wants to be in the movie business or knows somebody who's in the movie business, even if there are a few people removed. And the few people removed can be somebody who works on a crew. It doesn't have to be like a known famous person, but average daily life is always connected to this business. And that was insane. I came here from New Jersey. Me saying I wanted to move to LA and be a filmmaker was, I could not have said anything crazier to my parents, and so I thought it was wild that everybody knew somebody who works in it. And to me, it was so exotic. And to them, it was like nothing,
I completely agree with the sentiment. I had the exact same feeling when I first came here.
Yeah, no, totally.
So Altman describes Marlowe, the main character, as a man out of time, a relic in another era, kind of like when people say they're like an old soul, per se. He's a bit of like a 1950s private eye, but like in 70s LA. Do you resonate with him as a person? I know you kind of were saying about the mood and the aura of the film. So for one, do you resonate with that feeling of a person being kind of dropped in time? And then would you say it's more like comedic or tragic?
The not being in the right era is not a thing that I have. I know that that's something people often say or feel, but I don't. It's like December 26, 1982. That's when I was supposed to be born, and like it's all it's all in the right place. But one of the things that I love in that movie, and the longer I've been here, the more I've seen characters like this. And the Marlowe character is the type of guy who can only exist in Los Angeles. It's like he just kind of bounces around, and he is chill in a distinctly LA way. Even if he's from the 50s, he feels so LA to me, and it's like the furthest thing from what I am. I can be very rigid and uptight, and when I first moved here, and even still, I'm just like, oh, you're a California kid. Like you're so a California kid. What is that like to be that carefree and to just like roll with it? That must be so nice. But Henry Gibson in that movie is one of my favorites, probably of all time. I find him to be terrifying.
The acting,
just his performance is unbelievable, and it's so real. Listen, you live in LA long enough, and you know people who they go to rehab, they go to this, they go to that, and it's just, I mean, that can happen anywhere, but in Los Angeles, those places are like, they can be sort of run down and not great, but they can also be beautiful, and you can go visit somebody in the hills, in rehab, in Malibu or whatever, and which is bringing me to Sterling Hayden, who I think is truly one of the most fascinating actors of all time. But the Henry Gibson character, the people who run those places, not all, but some, and I've seen various articles about some of these people over the years, they're terrifying people who are just, controlling, these individuals who, have money or have somebody who's paying a lot of money to sort of take care of them. And it's such I'm not saying it doesn't happen anywhere else, but it just feels distinctly LA to me, It's like people have money to burn, somebody's fucked up, and then there's going to be some fucking weirdo with beady eyes who's like the guru who's in charge, And then you have Sterling Hayden, who is just like such a specific type of man that doesn't really exist, anymore. I am the effectively like the oldest a millennial can be, And
are you the last age? I'm the first age.
Yeah, I'm right on the cusp, And
I'm the first, I'm the youngest millennial.
Okay, there you go. And that type of guy is not a millennial. He's also not Gen X. It's like, that is a guy who fucking fought in World War II. And he is a drunk, and he is barefoot on the beach. And he just like, he's like a bear of a man who gets in fist fights and, it is basically like a Hemingway type. And oh my God, I love his performance in that movie so much.
The soundtrack for this film is by John Williams and Johnny Mercer, and they repeat the same song in different styles. What do you think about that?
Oh my God,
Did you notice it?
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, when do you see that?
I was going to ask you, I couldn't think of another movie that's done that, but I also didn't look it up. But I just am like, that is so smart. It's
unbelievable. I mean, has that existed somewhere else? Maybe, I don't know, but even if it does, I'm sure they were the first to do it. But but to me, that's like, Altman films are hypnotic. They really do. You watch The Long Goodbye, you watch McCabe and Mrs. Miller. It puts you in a trance, and it's unbelievable. And that also feels like something that only belongs in an Altman film.
Do you think that this movie is more about disillusionment or loneliness, or something completely different?
I mean, loneliness is certainly all the characters seem kind of lonely. I mean, you definitely have a bunch of people who are at a crossroads, and have, everything. I mean, from Where's My Cat? I mean, is there anything? I mean, let me rephrase that.
Oh, I forgot to bring up the cat. I love that.
I don't want to be hyperbolic. I can be hyperbolic at times. Yes, there are things worse than losing your pet. Losing your pet is top 5 worst things that can happen to a person, without question. And this guy, he doesn't know where his fucking cat is, man. I mean, like, if my pet went missing, kill me. And so to have that while he's trying to figure out all of this and just getting it's just like, come on, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
I cannot believe it took me this long to bring up the cat. I love that cat. Also, it was Altman's own cat that they used in
Oh,
the
wow.
film,
Wow.
which is cute. Yeah.
Can I give a cool little like film nerd thing that
Yeah.
I discovered related to this during COVID? I watched this movie probably a few nights in a row, maybe 2 or 3 nights in a row during COVID sometime, and then I went on Criterion, the app, and I found these. I think it might have just been one, and I cannot guarantee that you're going to find it because a lot of stuff that I found on there, I'm sure like everybody knows, it's not up forever. A license agreement is generally not in perpetuity. But there was this unbelievable interview with Sterling Hayden, and he is just he is untethered, and he is just like he's not just like, but he's very similar to this this character that he played, and he is just like he's an animal, and it is amazing to watch, and he doesn't give a fuck. And that's a good thing to look for. And if it's not on Criterion, just go watch old Sterling Hayden interviews on YouTube. They're riveting. They are riveting.
Cool. Okay, I love that. I'm sure like those listening will also be into that to do after this episode or listening to this episode. Okay, well, I think we should now get into your series, The Mortician. Do you have a kind of a brief way you've been saying a synopsis of the show?
Yeah, I could do that. So this story starts in Pasadena, which is in Los Angeles, and there was a family that owned and operated a mortuary for multiple generations. They actually established it in 1929, and it was called Lamb Funeral Home. And they were relied upon by the community. They were beloved by the community, and they were, most importantly, they were trusted by the community. And then in the early 80s, the great-grandson of the founder, his name was David Sconce. His name is David Sconce. He took over the operation. He was getting in a little bit of trouble, and his parents they wanted him to have a purpose. To be young and rudderless can equal trouble, and so they said, go to mortuary school and join the family business and take over the operation. And so he did. And not long after he did, rival funeral home owners, directors, morticians, cremation providers, they realized that he was cremating more bodies than the hours in the day would allow for. And so they started to poke around. And one in particular, he was a young guy, he was 24. His name was Tim Waters. And he was a cremation provider, an upstart in the business. He really started to poke around, do some detective work. And he figured out that David Sconce was cremating more than one body at a time. And that's obviously a big no-no. A family is giving you their loved one to put in the cremation oven solo, and then to return only their ashes in, whether it's a box, an urn, whatever it is that you've paid for. And this guy is putting sometimes 2 or 3, sometimes 6, sometimes 15 into an oven at a time, a crematorium. And so Tim Waters is about to go public with this allegation in the industry paper, essentially. It was called Mortuary Management Magazine. And before he could do that, he drops dead. He drops dead out of nowhere. And it is alleged by multiple people in the business that the last person he was seen with not long before he died was David Sconce, that they were seen having lunch together, actually. And so our story it's an examination of the business of death, its history, how we arrived at what it is today. It's a family drama. The Lamb family, the Sconce name comes from David's father, Jerry, and it's this noir murder mystery that is just woven with our relationship with grief and loss.
Were you aware of this story prior to working on this project?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't. It was December 2020. I was home like everybody else. I was remotely editing 2 projects. I made a doc-series on Hulu called Sasquatch. It was a very bizarre murder mystery about 3 guys who were allegedly murdered on a weed farm by a Sasquatch. And it sort of devolves into insanity from there. And then I was making a doc feature with Netflix about the painter Bob Ross. And I knew that those were going to come to a close in the next handful of months. And I really just was wondering what was next. And that was when, sort of going back to what we talked about earlier, just noir stories, LA noir. I just started looking around online, and I found myself reading these old LA Times articles about this story. And that was really what kicked it off.
Insane. Yeah. The premise of this documentary is just kind of like mind-blowing. Oh, well, first of all, I've always been curious about this. We've only ever had one other person who'd made a documentary on the podcast. It was a lot more lighthearted of a topic. But how do you go about like gaining people's trust to then give interviews? And in this situation, I'm like, how do you find everyone? How do you get them to trust you and open up? What is that like?
I guess I would go back to my first doc that I made, because that then set the stage for everything. And my first doc was, well, why don't I'm going to back up even further. So keep in mind, I'm a person who is trying to make films. I'm making some, terrible, shitty films. I mean, garbage, you know what I mean? Just over the years, you're trying to find your voice. You're trying to figure out what it is you do. You think you've made something good. No, it sucks. Everybody lets you know it sucks, but who cares? I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to make something good next time, right? And I'm at this point where I'm thinking maybe I can make a documentary cheaper, right? If I can just get my hands on a camera, then I can just make a film, and I don't need to ask permission. And so it was October 10th, 2008, and I was at a friend's birthday party in LA, and her dad was visiting from Panama City, Florida, and he was the judge there. He was a really good man. He has since passed away, Judge Sermons. And I asked him what cases and trials have stuck with him throughout the years. And he tells me about a 15-year-old girl who shot a cab driver in the back of the head on a deserted road in Panama City, Florida. And she was found guilty, which meant she was guilty of first-degree murder. And so in the state of Florida, that meant he needed to sentence her to life without parole. There was no question. And so I got home that night. I Googled her attorney. I Googled the words credit card. And then I signed up for every credit card I could. And suddenly I'm armed with, I think, about maybe $40,000 to $50,000 in credit cards, right? That are just going to come to me. And 2 months later, I'm filming on the road where she killed this man. And leading up to that 2 months, I'm working the phones. And I get in touch with her attorney, who wants nothing to do with me. Keep in mind, I'm 25 at this point. 25, and then turning 26. And I have these credit cards, I have a camera, I have a mic, I go, and I just start to meet people in person. And I'm coming across as I am in the most authentic way with them, which is, I care about this story. I didn't know juveniles could be sentenced to life without parole. I'm not going to make a film that's advocating, frankly, for them one way or the other. But I think that this is something that that needs to be told and told in a really nuanced way. And so that begins essentially a 6-year odyssey of making that film. It was called Lost for Life. And I basically did, every job on the film. It was like I booked the motels and the rental cars, and I find every single person to interview and then just go to them and interview them. And so what I learned while making that film was having, frankly, no agenda and just coming from a place of humanity and also obsession, really, in retrospect, I kind of realized that it was appealing. I think you and your story are important. I want to tell it. This is what I'm literally making my life about right now. And so second film, same thing. I'm getting everybody, and then eventually I'm fortunate enough to work with larger teams and amazing people, but I'm imparting that to them. And some people had a lot of experience who were working with me, but some were young and needed to learn. And it's just be a human being and go have a human conversation. And if you do, people will either agree or not, And so that's my approach to this day.
Were there any moments specifically on this project that you found difficult to film?
Oh God, yeah. Filming with the victims' families was very hard. Because there was so much anger that they rightfully still had. It's such an interesting thing. Yes, the person was dead. Nobody killed their loved one. That is, at the center of these specific crimes. But the betrayal was just, it was fucked, The other thing that was very difficult for a day was filming inside the crematorium that we shot in, because it is a functioning crematorium. And so we were there in between it being used to cremate people. And I am not familiar with death as a just sort of part of my daily routine, right? I am not around dead bodies, thankfully, and I am not around just all that goes on in a mortuary on a daily basis, and so it's a shock to the system. And at the end of the first day, I thought I was covered in dust, my boots, my jacket. It was ash, and I've kind of felt sick to my stomach, honestly. I was not prepared for that, and it was disturbing. And here's what's crazy: day 2 filming, I was totally comfortable being there. So and it was just one of those things like, oh yeah, people can get used to anything. And day 2, I was so excited to be filming, like I always am. And whatever it was that I needed to break through in terms of a barrier, mentally, being so close to death and all this sort of the physical parts of the world of the business of death, like there's ash and there's smells and all sorts of stuff. It was gone. And I thought that was wild.
It's funny when you said the phrase, like, people can get used to anything. It makes me think on the flip, the people interviewed in the documentary who were helping burn the bodies in multiple bodies at once, how they got used to doing this. Like at first they were like not eased into it is kind of a weird way to word it, but it's just wild how like people who end up doing criminal acts, it's that trajectory where it's like normalized, which is interesting. Have your thoughts on justice or closure changed at all telling these kinds of stories?
Yeah, I actually don't think closure is a real thing. I really don't. And I came to that when I was making my first doc, the Juvenile Lifer one, Lost for Life. Being with people whose children were murdered by some of these kids. I think some traumas are so great that it never gets closed. It will just take on a different form. And so I don't really believe in closure. Yeah. I'm not saying I'm right. It's just I just
well, your worldview.
Right? But I just don't know. Yeah, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, it's something that I haven't touched, that kind of like heartbreak or anything so tragic, in a sense that I could have any reference point to know what my answer would be. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
I have a note here. I don't know if this is factual, but the reason that your main character, he's a person, that he got caught was because of a World War II soldier smelled the burning flesh.
Yes, this is crazy. So this is airing, I know, or coming out after episode 2 airs. So early on in episode 2, you hear from a man who he worked in air quality control in San Bernardino County, and he tells a story of phone calls that were coming in from somebody who lived out in Hesperia, the foothills of the San Bernardino Mountains. This guy was calling, and he's like, I smell burning flesh. I smell burning bodies. And not that far from where he lived was a new, massive, sort of rickety, handmade too quickly, crematorium that David Sconce and his cohorts had built, where they were cremating 150 to 200 bodies at a time. And when this man is saying he smells burning flesh, the person on the other end of the line says, that's ridiculous. How could you? What are you? And he said, I was in a military unit that was part of liberating Auschwitz, and that is a smell that I will never forget. And I know that that's what I smell, and that's what made them go and take a look.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Insane. If I could have you just plug again where the listener can watch this story and like the date of the final episode.
The Mortician is airing Sunday nights at 9 on HBO, and then it's immediately available on Max. And the finale will air Sunday, June 15th.
Cool. And then I just have one last little section here just to end on a more lighthearted note. We have a game called Film Therapy. I'm going to say a phrase that's like a scenario, and then you tell me what movie comes to mind. There's no like right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so first, I feel like I kind of already asked you this, but you're creatively stuck, you feel like a fraud, and you want to feel inspired.
Taxi Driver.
You just nailed a dream project. Now what?
Wait, you just nailed a dream project? What does that mean?
Yeah, like maybe you got, I don't know, you got funding or something, and you're in a good mood, you want to watch a movie. What are you watching? Oh,
probably, I'm going Scorsese again. Probably Goodfellas.
It's 2 a.m. and you can't sleep because you're spiraling. What do you watch?
Vertigo.
You need to believe in humanity again. What do you watch?
Boogie Nights.
You're weirdly nostalgic for something that you personally never experienced. What do you put on?
Sunset Boulevard. Yeah.
You want to cry but can't. Nothing's coming out. What do you watch?
The Land Before Time.
You want to feel cool. What do you watch?
Oh man, I'm distinctly not cool. I don't know what, like, you want to feel cool. Fuck.
I'm like thinking something pretentious.
I don't know about that one. I'm just going back to Tango and Cash. When I was a kid, I never thought anybody was cooler than Stallone and Kurt Russell in that movie.
Valid. Okay, and then finally, you just need something dumb and chaotic to turn your brain off.
I don't know. I don't want to shit on any movies and call them dumb. They're too hard to take.
I guess like, because I describe a lot of movies as dumb, but I just mean like dumb funny, like it's not taking itself so seriously. You don't have to answer if you don't feel like what is like a comedic relief? Like it's low stakes. It's just good vibes.
For me, just good vibes is putting on like Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's just
valid.
They're obviously they're super smart, but those or The Sopranos. Frankly, it's if any of those are on, I am relaxed.
Good answer. Cool. Well, that is all I have for you today. So maybe let's end this with a movie that you think those who are listening have to see.
I think if anybody listening has not seen Los Angeles Plays Itself, I just think it's such a unique experience. I would highly recommend that.
Sweet. Me too. I recommend it as well. Well, thank you again, and it's time to get lost.
Good evening.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. To stay in touch, follow our Instagram page at It's Intermission Time and share with your friends. As always, Intermission is produced by Jazeel Chu and Olivia Dean, and of course, hosted by yours truly, Megan Braun. This episode is brought to you by The Synagogue.